I didn't think I was being manipulated. That's the scary part. Because if someone asked me back then, I would have said everything was fine, not perfect, but normal. And that word, normal, kept me stuck longer than anything else. Because nothing was extreme enough to make me leave. There were no big fights, no obvious disrespect, no moment where I could say, this is wrong. It was quieter than that, confusing and almost invisible. From the outside, but inside, something never felt right, and I kept ignoring it, not because I didn't feel it, but because I couldn't explain it. And when you can't explain something, you start doubting it. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was too sensitive, that maybe I was expecting too much. And little by little, I stopped trusting what I felt. Not all at once, just enough to stay. Because that's how it works. It doesn't break you suddenly. It slowly disconnects you from yourself, one moment at a time. And the hardest part is, you don't even notice it happening. You just start adjusting. You become more patient, more understanding, more careful. Until one day, you realize you've been doing all the work alone. But even then, you don't call it manipulation. You call it love, or effort, or commitment. Because admitting the truth would mean accepting something much harder. That what you're feeling isn't confusion, it's clarity you've been avoiding. And I wasn't ready for that. So I kept going, trying to fix something I couldn't name, trying to understand someone who never really tried to understand me. And that creates a very specific kind of exhaustion, not physical, emotional, the kind that doesn't go away with rest. Because it comes from constantly questioning yourself, replaying conversations, analyzing small details, looking for meaning in things that shouldn't be that complicated. And I thought that was normal, that relationships required that level of effort, that love meant trying harder, giving more, being more patient. But there's a difference between building something together and carrying something alone. And I was carrying everything, the connection, the communication, the emotional weight, and still feeling like it wasn't enough. And the hardest part about that is that no one sees it happening. From the outside, it just looks like you care more, like you're more invested, like you're the one trying to make things work. And for a long time, I wore that like something positive, like it meant I was strong, loyal, capable of loving deeply. But there's a hidden cost to that. Because when you're always the one holding everything together, you also become the one absorbing everything that's missing. The silence, the distance, the inconsistency. And instead of questioning it, you internalize it. You start thinking, maybe I need to communicate better. Maybe I need to be more patient. Maybe I'm asking for too much. And that's where the shift happens, quietly, almost invisibly. Because now, you're no longer responding to what's happening. You're adapting to what's lacking. And that changes your behavior in ways you don't even notice at first. You start explaining things away before they even need explanation. You start calming yourself down before even expressing what you feel. You start minimizing your needs just to keep things stable. And stability becomes your goal. Not connection, not depth, just no conflict, no distance, no risk of losing what little consistency you get. And that's how you slowly start accepting less, while convincing yourself it's enough, because it feels safer than asking for more, safer than confronting what's missing, safer than facing the possibility that this might never become what you hoped it would be. And that fear keeps you there, longer than anything else. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't just afraid of losing the relationship. I was afraid of losing everything I had already invested in it. The time, the energy, the version of myself that believed in it. Because walking away wouldn't just mean losing them. It would mean accepting that I stayed too long, that I ignored too much, that I abandoned myself slowly over time. And that realization felt heavier than staying. So I stayed, even when things didn't feel right, even when something inside me kept whispering, "This isn't what love is supposed to feel like." That's when the self-doubt gets louder. Because if you're doing everything and it's still not working, you start thinking the problem is you. So I tried to be better, more understanding, less reactive, more supportive, less emotional. And every time I changed something about myself, I expected things to improve, but they didn't. They just stayed the same. And that's when confusion turns into something deeper. Because now, you're not just questioning the relationship, you're questioning yourself, your reactions, your expectations, your worth. And that's where emotional manipulation lives, not in obvious control. It's not always about what they do. Sometimes, it's about what they don't do. The conversations that never happen, the clarity that never comes, the reassurance you keep waiting for, but never fully receive. And you start filling those gaps with explanations, with patience, with silence. Because it feels easier to adjust than to confront the emptiness. And that's where it gets dangerous. Because now, you're not reacting to reality anymore. You're reacting to what you hope is there, to what you believe could exist if things were just a little different. And that keeps you stuck, not in the relationship itself, but in the version of it you created in your mind. Because the reality, as it is, wouldn't be enough to make you stay. So your mind softens it, rewrites it, makes it easier to tolerate. And without realizing, you're no longer seeing things as they are. You're seeing them as you need them to be, in subtle shifts where you slowly stop trusting your own reality, where you feel guilty for things you don't even understand, where you apologize just to keep the peace. And I did that more times than I can count. Not because I knew I was being manipulated, but because it felt easier than confronting what I was starting to feel. Because deep down, there was always a voice, quiet but persistent, saying, "This isn't right." And I kept silencing it with logic, with excuses, with hope. Because hope is dangerous when it's attached to the wrong person. It keeps you invested in something that isn't growing. It makes you believe that effort will eventually pay off. That if you just wait a little longer, things will change. But time doesn't fix patterns. It only reveals them. And the more time passed, the clearer things became. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, undeniable moments. The lack of consistency, the emotional distance, and the way I felt more alone with them. And that realization is hard to accept because it breaks the illusion, the version of the relationship you were holding on to, the potential you believed in. And once you see it, you can't go back. You start noticing everything, the effort that never matches yours, the conversations that go nowhere, the emotional gaps you keep trying to fill, and suddenly, what felt confusing before starts making sense, not in a comforting way, but in a clear one. And clarity can feel brutal at first, because now you can't pretend anymore. You can't explain it away. You can't call it normal. You have to face it, that what you were feeling all along was real. And that changes everything. Because now the question is different. It's not, what's going on? It becomes, why am I still here? And that question is uncomfortable because it shifts the focus from them to you, your patterns, your fears, your reasons for staying. And that's where it gets even deeper. Because sometimes we don't stay because we're confused. We stay because something inside us isn't ready to let go of the idea, of the hope, of the version of them we created. And I had to face that I wasn't just holding on to them. I was holding on to what I wanted them to be. And that realization is not easy because it forces you to let go of something that never fully existed. And that kind of loss is different. There's no closure, no clear ending, just awareness. And awareness changes everything because once you see it, you start feeling it differently. The same situations, the same patterns, but now you're not ignoring them anymore. And that creates a shift. Not immediate, not dramatic, but real. You start pulling back, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You stop over-explaining. Stop over-giving. Stop trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. And for the first time, you start choosing yourself. Even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels unfamiliar. Because when you've spent so long adjusting to someone else, coming back to yourself feels strange, but necessary. And that's where things begin to change. Not because they changed, but because you did. And once that shift happens, there's something you can't ignore anymore. Not them, not the relationship, you, what you feel, what you tolerate, what you're no longer willing to accept. And that's when staying starts feeling heavier than leaving. Not because it got worse, but because you became more aware. And awareness doesn't let you go back to comfort. It pushes you forward, even when you're not ready. And maybe that's where you are right now. Not fully out, but not fully in anymore. Just aware. And if that's you, then this question matters more than anything. What are you still holding on to that's keeping you there? Because once you answer that, honestly, you won't be able to ignore it anymore. And sometimes, even when you finally see everything clearly, you still don't feel ready to leave. And that part no one really talks about. Because what scared me the most wasn't the relationship anymore. It was realizing something about myself that I wasn't ready to face. That maybe I didn't stay because I didn't see it. Maybe I stayed because a part of me needed it, and that changes everything. Because when you start asking yourself that question, you're no longer trying to understand them. You're forced to understand you, and that's where it gets even harder. Because the truth is, I didn't leave when I first saw it. I stayed. Even after I knew. And if you've ever asked yourself, why didn't I leave sooner? That answer is not what you think, and it's not easy to face.